recognition for LGBTQIA History Month. And I believe we have a presentation from some of our students.
Okay, sorry, I have to read off my phone. Okay, so I'm Erin, by the way. So basically, Ms. Huffman asked us to talk about the district resolution and how it creates a positive and safe environment for LGBTQ students. And so I said that the district resolution creates a positive and inclusive environment inside of the high school and provides the staff with the support and protections needed to help queer students thrive in classrooms, especially in our state of Missouri here. The staff at MRH are incredible at what they do and honestly are some of the most supportive people that I've ever met. As a queer student, I was able to come out in middle school and I got a lot of intense support from my educators. And in high school, I'm able to comfortably sit in my classrooms without worrying that my teachers won't be able to back me up if I'm facing bullying or any other discrimination. I also just think having the support and protection from the teachers and classrooms and staff helps students in the MRH district to feel empowered to speak about their experiences and provide insights in their identities with other members of the community. And I just think that this empowerment and support helps the mental health of students who may be struggling to find acceptance elsewhere and just helps create a safe haven at school for those students. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Avon Kriya. I will also be reading off my phone. So, as a queer youth in Missouri and a student at MRH, it has been uplifting to experience how our district supports the LGBTQIA+ community. At this point in time, when Missouri has banned trans students from playing sports and is preventing them from receiving life-saving health care, it is crucial for schools to support queer and trans youth. With the LGBTQIA affirming resolution that the school board passed in 2023, which includes recognizing October as LGBTQIA History Month across the district, I believe that MRH has displayed outstanding support for queer and trans students. The resolution not only secures the safety of our students and staff, but it dismantles the wall built by Missouri legislation to block the rights of queer and trans Missourians. This resolution has encouraged me, a queer student, to feel safe and uplifted and to join organizations like PALB and knowing that my voice and identity matter here at MRH. So I'm really happy and I feel really great here. Thank you.
Thank you both for coming. We really appreciate it, and we're always here to hear whatever ways we can be supportive, so thank you. All right, next we have our public forum. Do we have anyone signed up?
Just Ethan will sign up.
Okay, just it. Okay, all right. Oh, you're good. You're good. Unless you have something else you want to share. Okay, all right. All right. We're all good. So next we'll have consent agenda. May I get a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any questions, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Next we have study items. The first one is Board Policy Batch 2024B by Dr. James.
Thank you. As the board is aware, MSBA frequently will send updates to policies as it relates to changes in law, and the board also has the ability to modify policies as they come about. These policies are actually brought to us from MSBA, and a lot of the policies are either updates to existing policies or changes. So policy JO, which is listed, is additional protection for students with IEPs and also ensures that permanent records are actually kept in the district. One of the modifications for this particular policy is that special school district actually writes the IEPs, but the district will actually also keep some of that information as well, but they are actually the holders of any of those records that are permanently kept. The policy that goes along with that as well is JEC1, school admissions. This particular policy has been modified for adult students. It doesn't particularly pertain to MRH, but students who are considered adults actually have to have background checks prior to coming onto district property. So this is a modified policy to ensure the safety of students and staff for those students who are actually adults who are enrolled. So you would see this for school districts that actually offer option programs for students outside of the district. Policy DF1, setting tuition rates, again, modified policy. Oftentimes the district will enroll students who are placed in residential facilities. This particular policy and another policy that's included in this particular batch allows us to enroll those students as we would other students who are placed, say, in foster care and things of that nature. And the accompanying policy that goes along with this also ensures that we can build back if we do actually enroll students into the district for those students who are eligible to enroll. Policy KH, which this policy actually is one that was asked about at the last board meeting. It's a fundraising policy, and it was actually sent forward in this particular batch from MSBA. This particular policy outlines fundraising, particularly for students, to ensure that they have the ability to fundraise as with other organizations within the district, and how those donations should be requested and where the money should actually be funneled for this particular policy. And the other policy is BDC, and this particular policy is probably most prevalent because it actually looks at what information should be closed and actually publicly made available. And so you can see the changes that are outlined there as well. These policies are being presented as a first read, and we'll come back, and if there's feedback for these particular policies, modifications will be made based on the board feedback. Are there any questions?
I did have a question about the criminal background check policy. I know that the explanation at the top mentions the change that happened in Missouri statute a few years ago around the employees who have been fingerprinted, are part of a registry that will continue to update us. I see that that's being removed now with whatever the modifications that the policy has had it, or the statutes had at the state level. Is that are we still being notified if existing employees who have been fingerprinted are, okay, they just don't have to be their fingerprints don't have to be updated every 6 years.
Right, they
Okay.
don't have to be updated, but if a particular staff member were to have a challenge, we are immediately notified. The Human Resources Office is notified of that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that there was still that safety in place in the event of some very unusual circumstance.
Anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question on policy, what is it? Yeah, IGDF, student fundraising. So I noted that the last two paragraphs were struck, which had to do with the manner in which the funds are deposited. Are we going to refer back to essentially what we had talked about in the previous meeting as another policy?
Are you on the next batch?
Oh, did I?
Yeah,
skip
sorry.
it?
Yeah, no, we're still on the first one. We'll get
Mea culpa.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I
Nope.
know there's two entries here, and I did catch one ahead.
I had a question on JO. I guess my only question was, I understand we're unique in that we have a special school district separate. My only question was how that term district is defined. I just didn't want to inadvertently if it uses the term district, if we are required to keep them as well and not just the school district or the special school district.
We are required to keep them
Okay.
as well. So they actually write the IEPs, they're included in their systems, and then we also have a copy in student files.
And maybe I just couldn't read it because it cut off, but does that sentence also say IEPs? Because it looks like we took out our responsibility to maintain IEPs. That's why I asked.
So that was the markup. So they Assembly made changes because they had challenges with users who may not have been as savvy, and so they were deleting whole policies. So
Okay.
they removed our ability to actually go in and strike through. So if you notice, some of the
Okay.
other policies we had were
Yeah.
struck through. So
Okay.
as a means to try to show the modification, CAT actually
Tried to
added
put a
that.
box
Yes.
So this will still say, even though it'll add with about special school district,
Yes.
it'll still say that.
Yes.
Okay, that was my only. And then one question is just not necessarily related to the policy, the DFI, it says that the superintendent makes recommendations annually about setting tuition rates. When does that typically happen?
So we actually do not take tuition, which is,
Okay, at all?
no.
Okay, so we don't do that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Those were my only 2 questions. I don't know, does anyone else have anything else? Good. All right. The next item is board policies, IGB and IGDF.
Perfect. So the first policy here under this particular batch is around district-sponsored fundraisers. And so depending on who's sponsoring the actual event. So for example, if you have one of the athletics clubs that's actually sponsoring, this particular policy outlines that students have the same rights as those entities that are actually fundraising and how those are actually conducted. So you can see the language that's actually been added and how it's delineate what the support for students. So students get the same support. We are to provide to them, for example, if they want to use facilities and things like that, they get the same opportunity to do that.
Brian, a question here?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so just on this, this particular policy revision, with the elimination of the 2 paragraphs referring to how the funds are to be managed once collected, are we going to add a statement referring to this other policy that we talked about in terms of the disposition of funds? Could we do that, or is that something that would typically be done here?
Yeah, it was moved into another policy. So typically what happens when they make strike-throughs, because at the bottom of the policy, it indicates what other policies are attached. So policy DI talks about fiscal accounting and reporting. So that information is just being moved into a different policy.
Got it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
And then the next policy, IGB, it really is just updating the policy to have the Director of Student Services to be more clear about who the compliance officer is for this particular policy for students with disabilities. So that would be Vince Estrada. When Dr. Shonda Embers Phillips came on, we started to remove the titles of people so that every time new hires came in, we weren't actually adjusting names, and so they all include the actual position that a person holds.
Okay, so I remember my question. Do we have for students, and I guess for anyone who fundraises, is there like an application they fill out, or how does that process work? Because I noticed like there's a sample one on MSBA, but I wasn't sure.
There is a form
Okay.
that is used, the high school distributes, and it's completed, and it indicates like what's being asked, like if you need
Okay.
facilities and things of that nature. Sometimes the district can hold, if it's an event, like say in the gym, we can hold the insurance carrier for that.
Okay.
Usually Mr. Holzer will work with that entity to do that. So there is a form, and the high school principal will actually complete that form.
Okay, so if a student wanted to do it, they would just go to the office and
Yes.
talk with Ms. Huffman. Okay. All right. Any other? Nothing else? Nope. Okay. So now we are on to item 4, admin communications. The first item is community roundtable debrief by Dr. Jason.
So I'm excited to give an update on the Board of Education Roundtable. Just to remind community, this is a new event that was added based on feedback from the community in regards to hearing more and having an opportunity to interact with the board. The rationale for this particular item, 1, it aligns with transparency to ensure accountability, whether it's the school improvement plans or fiscal responsibilities similar to this particular item. But it also aligns with Instrument 6 for Standard L3. The board is responsible for adopting and monitoring the district's strategic plan, here it says Comprehensive School Improvement Plan, but DESE allows districts to choose one or the other. We had over 80 participants to participate, and this is our second year actually surveying to get feedback in regards to where our respondents actually received the information, and a lot of the respondents indicated that they received invites from email, newsletters, and you see the second place where that actually is taking place is from social media. So the event satisfaction, I am pleased to say that 90% of our participants said that they were either very satisfied or satisfied with the event. And for me, changing based on the feedback that we were provided from the last one in regards to reducing the number of topics, providing the tables with the topics, and including more time for participants to actually consume the information and really give viable feedback. And also from the feedback, noting that changing the way that we were actually collecting data from participants so that it flowed a little bit better, because the thought catcher we used in the previous year really didn't necessarily align with some of the information that we were trying to collect. So I did want to highlight that we are, as a district, responsive to the feedback that we're getting from community. So I looked through all 44 pages of the feedback and looked for threads and trends that actually represented the voice of those individuals who actually participated. So from a GLOW standpoint, they talked about the presentation being very clear and easy to follow, and also ensuring that that break in time after a presentation was actually done, that they were able to digest that small bit of information, discuss it, ask any questions, and also request additional information for future meetings. The other piece of information was learning and being able to provide perspective, but a lot of the feedback actually resulted from the table conversations themselves and the diversity of individuals that were actually included at the tables. And really having members of the school district to be at the tables to share their perspectives about the families and the projects and some of the work that we do, whether it's related to metaphor work. Some of the goals that were actually identified, they wanted more transparency. And for me, this is one where I would be very eager to do some focus groups with community to further understand what transparency means for them. And then also understanding when we talk about central office expenses, are we talking about budgetary expenses such as office supplies and things of that nature, or are we speaking more of salaries of its central office administrators for that particular piece? And then the piece that I found to be most interesting was including the discussion on how to reach out to community to share information. And I think this is still a growth opportunity for us as a district, because when you think about the participants that attend the roundtable, it's typically the same engaged individuals. So how do we tap into those individuals who have kids in the district, who don't have kids in the district, and then also increasing participation for some of our community members who are not frequently represented. So our Black and Brown families, students whose families get support from free or reduced lunch, and then also our students and families who identify as LGBTQIA, because I think their voices matter too. And then sharing the feedback from the groups. I think a missed opportunity this time, we didn't do the share outs. So that's something that we will reincorporate and really look at how do we ensure that that information and those discussions for those thoughts are actually shared out to the community, and even given an opportunity for clarifying questions to be posed along the way. And the one that I probably felt had a lot of opportunity for us would be doing more planning together. So a lot of the feedback that we received was, it's great to offer voice, but once we narrow down what those needs are, how do we use the expertise in the room to be able to plan and look at ways to resolve some of the things that actually surfaced during that time. And we had several individuals who indicated that we needed to make a plan to begin to think about how do we increase district revenue to be able to support teacher salaries and benefits. So we had a couple activities, and then we also sent a follow-up survey out to community. We had approximately 143 participants. I would say we definitely need to think about how do we increase participation to get a really good snapshot of what our community believes and thinks. But high on the list were salaries and benefits, safety and security, and facility and maintenance upkeep, particularly around some of the deferred maintenance, and that's typically where we do most of the cost cutting, sorry, Dr. Dietrich, in order to save money for the district. And very far off would be the technology and infrastructure, and I do think that there's some there to ensure that our kids have access and that we're expanding their level of technology use and integration in the classroom so that it's more transformational. So really, to give you a breakdown, I will tell you that the feedback was they're all important, so why do we have to rank them? Because we can't do them all, and we do have to prioritize and really get feedback based on what's there. So you can see based on the average score that is listed, it aligns with the other bits of information, but again, we recognize that we don't want to pick something at the expense of the others because it's very important for us to meet the needs of our students, and they have been very clear that a track and field is needed. And I would have to agree with them that there is a strong desire to be able to provide that, but it also is a revenue generator because we can also offer track meets and things of that nature. We also had an activity where participants could come in and place a vote in regards to where they wanted to spend their dots and also vote again after the roundtable. I think we needed to do a better job of actually clarifying what that meant, because you technically could have spent all 3 of your dots on salaries and benefits. So I think being clear about how to use those and making sure that all of our guests are actually doing both sides of it. But I did want to show the total there, and it corresponds with the actual survey that we sent out. So that was pleasing to see. And I will also say to see that there is an increased focus for efforts around salaries and benefits. We do still have work to do around the district, and we do want to retain the teachers that we have, and it is very competitive out here. So I did an analysis of the table discussion just to really look at the areas that we focused on. So it was revenue, expenses, bonds, debt management, and then some miscellaneous things that actually came up. So there was a lot of conversation around, raising taxes, tax levies, some conversation around bonds. So, but there really wasn't a lot of feedback saying that those who were in that room were not interested in supporting something. We had feedback around creating a foundation, which I think is a great opportunity, but you also have to have people to facilitate that and also go out and raise money. Facility rentals, that's a conversation that Dr. Dietrich is already looking at, comparing rates around to see if ours are competitive for our spaces. We currently have some very strong business partnerships, and there were some ideas around fundraising, which I chuckled a bit because I said that would be a lot of fundraisers to get heat pumps that cost $1 million. But family donations, alumni donations, that one was really intriguing to me because we do have a lot of alumni that we are not tapping into. And so really looking at how do we create an alumni database, not only to get them engaged in some of the work, particularly around our metaphor at the high school, because they are doing great things in the community and we can actually use that as a conduit, but also seeing if they would support some of the ideas that the students will be later bringing to the table around their wants and desires for their spaces and communities. There were a lot of conversations around programming and where we're spending our money, looking at sliding scales for things like ACT, AP courses in early college. The district invests a lot of money in those programs, and if we're talking about looking at it through the lens of equity, we either need to have a sliding scale or really look at what that money is being spent on. Seed to table was one that was brought up. I don't necessarily agree with that one because that's one of those things when we talk about what makes MRH unique. Our seed to table program is one of those. And I would share that when I took our DESE representative to the Blue Duck, that was one of the things that I was able to talk about, is that they actually create meals based on the food that we harvest from our gardens. Expenses, they talked about deferred maintenance, increased class sizes, looking at our approach to technology, device deferment, and then capstone trips. And again, capstone trips are a part of what make us unique. So while I recognize that's a way to save money, I think that we can also look at business partnerships to see if we can offset costs. So for bond and debt management, borrowing more since debt is paid down. So if the community remembers, we actually paid down some of our debt through those bonds that we had, which was strategic, and the approach that Mr. Hosier actually brought to the table. And looking at the cost associated with the current interest rates, and then of course you see new track and field. There are a ton of miscellaneous items that came up that I did not want to leave without mentioning. So really looking at our TIFs, we have great partnerships with both of the city managers, so we are keenly aware of what TIFs are actually rolling off the books and how much money we can anticipate coming forward. And then there was a push between looking at a bond levy and the benefit of that to remove capital projects out of the operating budget, which would then generate revenue for us. So next steps, scheduled community conversation focused on finance. That will actually take place in November. I think there were some questions that were posed within the feedback that we received that gives us an opportunity to further educate our community around how we spend funds, how we fare if we're talking about central office salaries, and also thinking about the structure of central office in comparison to other districts. Really distilling down the notes that we collected to those champions for each of those strategic planning areas, because I think there were some things that came out that would be beneficial for them as they work in their committees to begin to think about how do we accomplish some of the things that our community has charged us with. And the other piece is a board work session really to dig into how might we be able to generate additional revenue to meet our needs, and then identifying additional strategies to engage community so that they are aware of what we're trying to do, the why, and that we are here to serve kids and the adults who support them. That concludes my presentation for tonight. I welcome any questions that the board may have.
It was my first one I was able to attend, and I really enjoyed the conversation that we had at our table, so I thought it was good. So thank you for your presentation. So no more questions. No one has any questions? All right. Moving on to the draft budget timeline by Chris.
Thank you and good evening. So just as we jump into the current fiscal year, it's time to start planning for the next one. And we're also auditing the prior. So we've got three things going on simultaneously, so it's good fun. I really do enjoy budgets, although they are quite difficult. I've always liked puzzles, and a budget is a very large puzzle. So starting in November, we're going to bring that budget directive to you, and we'll work through that collaboratively for subsequent approval in December. We'll also be passing out the budget packets to our administrators responsible for budgets so they can start soliciting input from their staff. And we'll distribute those packets. We'll be asking for those packets completed back from them before we leave for winter break. So that's going to be quite a big adjustment for them. But I'm hopeful that the principals and administrators we have on board now have done this enough that we'll be able to get through that process. We've also made it a point to start regular training our administrators on the concepts of budgeting and what that looks like in schools. In January, we'll start presenting some of those assumptions that we're making for the next fiscal year to you, the board, and we'll be reviewing, Dr. Shonda Ambers-Phillips and I will be reviewing staffing requests and seeing how those might fit into the budget. And we're as we've been mentioning for a few months, we've been developing a staffing model so that we can understand what type of human resource we need to allocate based on student need. So then those budget meetings are going to start, and those are amazing. That's when Dr. J and I get to spend quite a lot of quality time together, reviewing, scrutinizing, trimming, asking folks to defend their budget. That's how I approach it. I ask them to defend their budget, much like you would a dissertation or a doctoral work. In February, I will still be bringing the first look at revenue. It is quite early for that, but I think it's important that before we get too far down the road of expenses that we have at least some understanding of what our potential revenues will be. Moving on through the months, each month thereafter you'll be receiving more and more information in each of those presentations that will then culminate in the final budget presentation to the board at our board work session. In May, you'll be getting a summary for the budget, the most recent revenue and expense amounts, including additional staffing recommendations to you, the board, and the budget book that we are going to be looking at. We'll probably be making some modifications to that budget book as we move closer to the budget workshop. But all that aside, the budget book is still going to be an important component of the work that we'll be doing through the winter and spring. And then, of course, in June, we'll present that final budget to you for approval. And then July 1 starts the fiscal 26. What questions do you have?
I appreciate you putting it together. I'm glad to see it. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I just wondered if we could, I had actually a question, November. So it says budget packets, it says allocations based on enrollment. And so I guess my question is, I thought we did, but maybe I'm wrong. Do we employ zero-based budgeting model?
We have historically.
Okay.
This past year, we started moving to a more formulaic approach.
Okay,
A dollar allocation per student
Okay.
for instructional supplies and purchase services, and then a dollar allocation per staff for building-led PD.
okay,
We do still have some aspects of the budget that will be zero-based. One of those will be metaphor,
okay.
and Dr. Jameson and I will wrestle over what other components remain zero and what move to formula. But the idea is that we are using the formulaic approach gives us a little bit more predictability
Okay.
as we come in. So, and it also forces the administrators to fit within guardrails that we've already established.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I guess I just didn't know if we could add to November that community meeting.
Let you and Dr. Jameson figure out how that's going to work.
And then,
Is that how you did it on city council to get information kind of
Yeah.
that early in the process, or more reflection on a draft?
so we started in November. It was a meeting where there was like a presentation on the budget about sort of how it works, and then community input about what they wanted resources allocated to. So it was sort of both those things. And it was, the first one we did was in November. I think the second year it ended up getting pushed to January because of some things. It didn't have as many participants because January is rough. So I think November is kind of a nice time for
If
it.
you're talking about like a warm-up, this is what we're
Kind of
thinking.
like the community roundtable too, like this is sort of how it works, and then it was sort of like a group discussion about,
Education with follow-up discussion.
yeah, just kind of like, or you could, we could be there and separate into groups if people wanted to do anything like that. It can be kind of a, and then I think we had talked about the meeting in May, the work session being in person. That was the only thing perhaps that when we have our budget work session, it might make sense to do that in person rather than on a.
Just so that I'm clear, so the May work session to have Kat to adjust to be in person?
I mean, that was something that had come up. I don't know if people have thoughts about that.
I'm certainly okay with it.
I'm good with it too.
Thank you.
So Jetty, so currently there's not a community roundtable scheduled for November, is that right?
It's the community conversations that
Okay.
it's going to be focused on that, and then the idea will be every November to do that community conversation and to do it here instead of like at Schlecht, to have that meeting here.
And this would be an opportunity then for the public to not only understand the budget process, but also to give their input on priorities? Is that what you're
Yeah, I
envisioning?
think, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that would be what I would look for. I don't know, it's a sort of group decision about what we're looking for.
That's actually what was included in some of the comments.
Yeah.
So for the questions, when I was indicating that there were some pieces that I didn't present, but a lot of that came out. They wanted to know more about the budgeting process, which to Mr. Hoser's explanation of how he actually allocates for professional development, and there were some other questions. So I can actually detail that out and share what those items are to the board.
I would just recommend on that, I mean, looking at the feedback, you had the survey results there, but the qualitative feedback, excuse me, the multiple people indicated, just do all of it. And then there were a couple responses there that indicated just the very fact that the board is asking the public for this information suggests the board is abdicating its responsibility. And I would just hope that we can at least address that second issue head on at the meeting and just say, this isn't us abdicating our responsibility asking for your input, but it's, we could.
It's that it's your money,
It's your
so
money,
we'd also
and we
like
need
to know
frame it.
from
So
you,
we might need to address how we frame it so we
Yeah.
don't get that. But of the people who are telling us, well, just do it all, what I think would help, and this just from what I remember from sitting at the table where I was sitting and then talking with a few folks afterwards, is a sense of some real numbers attached to these issues that that might generate a need for a bond or an operating levy, but also just things that impact the budget. So not just a general budget overview, but could we give some specific kind of items that we're thinking of needing some particular public input?
So I will say that I do have a timeline that will be shared with the board in regards to what I'm thinking for that. That's pretty detailed. And Dr. Dietrich is actually working to compile the previously requested list of projects and the cost for that. So he will have that done by November, so that information will actually be shared, and once you actually see the timeline that's been established, it'll be very clear around what that looks like. So I think we can cover that piece too.
So would that be like our November session we would do that, or will be our meeting?
Well, we probably will need a couple. So I think the November work session is one. I do think that it would be prudent for us to look at the district central office staff and then also look at what similar positions exist across other districts. And because I think the assumption is that we are heavy and we really aren't, and that the salaries that are currently being distributed are above what the salaries would be for those positions. And quite honestly, all of my direct reports are underpaid in regards to the surrounding districts where we typically lose teachers to. So it's not just a teacher issue when we talk about salaries, it's also central office too. So we'll bring that item forward because several people did mention that as well.
The only other thing too that I'd love to include in the timeline is the public comment session or opportunity once we have a full budget. So like, I really like not having that be the same night we vote on the budget. So are we anticipating the budget book would be presented like by that May meeting? So like public could comment at that May meeting, should they?
So that was the ask of the
Yeah.
board, and so the plan is to have the full budget book, and again, there will be some adjustments
Right.
here and there for May so that you
Okay.
can comb through that, and then the actual May meeting also includes with that facilitated board work session. So if the board would like, that one could be in person too. So that's another way to actually have some conversation and really weave in opportunities for feedback or whatever the community or the board will is around that piece.
Okay. So that's great. So we will have a chance in May for
Yes.
public to comment before then we vote. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Have any other questions? Thanks, Chris.
Welcome.
All right. Next we have, let's see, sorry, I lost myself. Finance. And you are up again with September financial statements.
Give us just a second. I'm on a hotspot. My laptop is refusing to connect to the network, so Dr. McGee's helping me. Linda, I must have used all my good tech juju when I got yours working.
Yeah, mine is not working either. I don't know what's happening.
Looks like he might be suffering from the same problem.
like I'm trying.
Chris, did you want to just start
I can
talking through,
absolutely.
and then we'll continue to work through?
All right, this will be the financial statement overview for September. Well, I'm essentially talking through those, but the presentation summary is slightly different than this, but contains mostly the same information. So through September, we are $3.4 million collected on our operating revenues, which is a little over 12.5% of the budget. That's a $1.7 million increase from last year. Increase in revenues related to our net insurance recovery, CBE grant, MSD grant, in lieu of taxes from a closed TIF over at Cambridge Commons, and salary reimbursements from SSD, our partner. We'll talk more about that when we get to the budget amendment in the next line item. So on our expenses, 78% of our expenses go toward our human resource in the form of salaries and benefits. As we know, that's important because our human resource is our most valuable asset as a school district. Coming on to expenditures, purchase services through September are $532,000, just about 14% of the budget, just a little bit lower than they were last year this time. Supplies are about the same at about 27% of the budget. Capital outlay, about 57% of the budget, and that is higher. That ebbs and flows depending on the year, depending on when we engage in these projects. So it didn't happen this year, but if we put a roof on in July, you're going to see a large expense come out in July. If we do that in March, you'll see it come out in March. So it just really all depends on the timing of how we spend those funds. Long and short-term debt on the operating side, $56,000, which is our interest payment for the lease purchase agreement. And then overall, we've spent about $4.9 million through September. As of right now, we're budgeting for a 30.4% ending fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. And what questions might you have?
A couple, but does anyone else have any questions? I just had two, and forgive me if I asked this last month and I don't remember the question, the answer, but on the operating funds page, it's 5179 student activity revenues. Is that like student fundraising or something?
Sure is. Yes.
Okay, so we don't budget for it, but so it'll show up.
Mostly. So we don't budget for student activities. That's more of a cash concept.
Okay.
But student activities would encompass any donations that were given to student groups, any fundraisers that they do.
Okay.
Yes.
Is it like when they charge at the door, does that go in, or is that?
Exactly.
Okay.
Gate receipts, that's a perfect example of one of the revenue streams that would go into the athletics department.
Okay. And then the only other one was on line 5198, other local revenue. Last month it said like 156,000, and this month it's only 3,200. So I wasn't sure what that revenue is and why it's different.
Wish you would have asked that question just a little bit earlier. I need to do a little bit of research to understand that.
Yeah. Those are my own questions. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you. We have you again with budget amendment. Can't get
Chris
away from
Holzer.
that.
Okay, so I am happy. I'm going to skip to the summary here. So we are adding about $1.2 million in revenue, and it's important that you understand why. So I've got a listing of things that are impacting that. The most impactful revenue increase that we have is related to our insurance reimbursements due to the great flood of, I don't even remember what year it was now, but it was bad. And we received about $945,000 in reimbursements on that. We also have the Cambridge Commons TIF that closed, so we got some in lieu of taxes on that. SSD salary reimbursement. We got another ITEF grant. Thank you, Dr. McGee and team. We're slight increases due to setting our tax rate, so we recalculated revenue potential revenue there, so that'll add there. We've added interest that we've been earning on some of our bond proceeds, and that is really about it. Oh yeah, we've got some donations that we've added. The MSD grant, so it's been quite a good couple of months as far as bringing in additional revenues. And on the expenses side, we are expecting a little bit of an increase there, just about $80,000 in increase. Overall, the impact on the fund balance is a net positive of 4%. So you just heard me say that we are currently budgeting for a 30.4%. Now we will be budgeting 34.4% for the next month. And if anyone has any money, they can keep sending it. I don't mind changing the budget. So.
Anyone have any questions? I just have one. I just am a little sensitive to the purchase services since last year we spent a lot more than we had originally budgeted. What is that increase in purchase services? It's like $99,000. What do you think? I'm just curious what that comes from.
I meant to have that number right in front of me, but I don't. Let me get back to you on that, Jenny.
Now we are on to item 6, board communications and discussion. The first one is calendar of events. And I think coming up on November 9th, we have a district-wide open house, so for all the different school buildings and central office. And then it's also the Kiwanis breakfast that morning at the high school, so you get a twofer that day. And that is all I have. I don't know if anyone else has any other events. Okay.
I'll be attending Missouri School Board Association conference this weekend in Kansas City on behalf of all of us. Bring back some learning for the board.
All right, next week. What?
I was going to mention that trunk or treat.
Oh, trunk or treat. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I wasn't prepared. When is that?
The 26th.
The 26th at
ECC parking lot. Right?
ECC at noon to 2. All right. Thank you. And
It is I see perpetual calendars underneath here is now, we're gonna move to that. I'm not totally sure.
why would that?
The setup here is slightly different in Assembly, but Dr. Jameson, I was just wondering if you could articulate why we're not following the perpetual calendar this month as far as the enrollment updates and the annual performance review update.
How about we start with the annual performance review? We receive updates from DESE either during the Commissioners Advisory Council, which I'm a member of, or updates received from our Education Plus meeting. So the department is slightly behind on getting the data back to school districts. We initially were told that we would have the information back in September. Now we're thinking late November, early December for that. And there are also some new shifts to how that information will be disseminated. The enrollment item is actually being pushed in November, and the shift will actually continue for the duration of the perpetual calendar because the October core data report is due at the end of the month, and we have to ensure that the numbers that we're reporting to the state mirror the numbers that we actually have in the system. So, for example, the district cannot disenroll a student until we actually receive the records from where they are going. And some districts send the information over right away. Others, typically there's a delay, so we want to make sure that the information that we're reporting to the state matches what is actually being reported to the board and to the community.
Yeah, Josh had suggested, which I think is a good idea, that we just move that item to November going forward, since that deadline is probably never going to be met. So, and I don't think it, for our purposes, matters which month. So, I thought that was a good idea as well.
Great. While we're making adjustments to the perpetual calendar because of the budget, new budget timeline, might as well make those other adjustments as well. Thank you.
All right, number 2, Pal Board report.
sorry, wait a second.
Oh, sorry, yep.
Is this the time where I can make a comment about events before we move on?
Oh, sure.
Sure, okay. Well, I just wanted to acknowledge the cross-country team. They had their senior night last night, and 9 seniors were honored. I just want to mention that 2 students on the team had been with the team for 4 years, and there was the state tracks, pun intended, the times that they had as freshmen all the way through to their time as seniors, and 2 of the students on our team made it to the top 20 or top 30 list of all runners in the state for best improved times over 4 years. Graham Colvin was in the top 20, Daniel Matz was in top 30, and then we had several students who had achieved, every student on the team had achieved personal bests in the current year. And so anyway, I just want to point out that the team is growing. It continues to be stronger. They're winning as a team at more and increasingly more events with each new calendar year. And I just want to honor the team for the work that they did.
Hi everyone, I know I'm new here, so I'll reintroduce myself. My name is Maya Trumper. I'm a senior at MRH and I am the president of Maplewood. I have a presentation here and I don't have access to those computers. Is there any way
can you
get
see
that
if
up
you
there?
can actually cast up? We're having some technical difficulties.
Yes, perfect.
There we go.
Thank you so much.
Hey.
Okay, perfect. So now we can actually go ahead and get started. Now you know me and the presentation is working. So this year we have picked an overarching theme to focus on, which are sort of the adjectives safe and inspirational. And from that larger category, we're breaking it down month by month, focusing on specific areas that we can focus on within that larger topic. So this month we focused on talking about mostly safe and inspirational spaces and facilities. So that was the main focus. This month we have some additional focuses that you will hear from later this year, but not talking about today. So we can go ahead and move on. So last year, typically it was presented in a way where we would discuss what we did for the month and then resultingly have an ask for you guys. I think it makes most sense to actually start with the ask so you know straight up what I want, and then I'll defend it. So here's what I want. I think we should have funds to support a communal space in the high school gym lobby, and I also think that we need to prioritize furniture in budget planning, as well as including a student and or teacher perspective when we're making those decisions. So starting off first, this is the image of our very new, lovely, improved high school gym lobby. It's a very beautiful space. It's big, open, windows into our also new commons. And this is just really an unused space right now. It's an entrance or an exit to and from the school, but really it's a quite large space that I think we really need to make use of considering the amount of natural light and space that is available. And this is where we're suggesting to implement those funds to support flexible seatings, things like additional outlets to support a communal space there. So first of all, starting with a section about for our students. So this month we did a lot of school outreach. We communicated with every school in our district, the ECC, elementary, middle school, about how they felt about the spaces they were in every day, how they felt about the school. And the most common themes that we saw were the lighting and sort of when they're in the classroom, that sort of, you know, like hospital lighting can be really harsh, and sort of how much like sunlight and dimmer lighting can make a difference on the students' enjoyment of their day, as well as having the opportunity to work sort of communally, which is why we ended up making the decision to request that communal space in the high school, because it provides an opportunity where students can meet in a group and also a place that has amazing amounts of sunlight, which is why we chose that space. As for our second ask, when we're talking about furniture, right now, both the high school, middle school, and some students spoke to this at the elementary as well, we have several pieces of outdated furniture. So one, I'm sure if you are a parent of a student at the district, you have heard about the broken chairs. You've heard about the pinching of the legs, and it's a real problem, but also like I think it's important to acknowledge that these problems we're talking about isn't just some like little complaint, like it is something that's influencing our day-to-day lives and our enjoyment of being at school, which is why we decided that it's definitely something that should be prioritized in the future. There's also some instances of tables being literally too big to fit into classrooms and ending up in storage because it's not working in the space. Now, for our health, we have some notes about the importance of communal spaces and sort of to additionally back up why we should have this space in the gym lobby, because having sort of a communal space within the school gives students the opportunity to continue discussions outside of the classroom, which is different than if they'd be meeting at Quick Trip or the skate park. Because it's sort of in the school, it encourages like increased conversation about the school academic topics with their friends, which means that it's actually increasing the amount of learning that's occurring in our building, as well as providing all students like a place to like be safely with their friends. Another benefit of this space comes from the natural light. I have this source here. It's also on the site originally where everything else is located if you want to take a look at that. But natural light in students is associated with a 20 to 26% faster rate of improvement when compared to peers who didn't have access to natural lighting in their day-to-day, school activities, which is again why the gym lobby is such a great place to have this funds to support that. And for health, I mentioned this a bit earlier about the furniture and ill-fitting furniture negatively impacting student focus, but I mean, it is a real problem. If we're trying to prioritize students focusing in class, they shouldn't be focusing on the fact that the chair is broken and pinching their leg. And also modern furniture is able to promote physical health in that like we're prioritizing better posture, which is better for overall health, and actually being able to engage with the material when they're not distracted by a broken chair or a table that doesn't fit in a class. And that is all I have. So if anyone has any questions, I would love to answer them.
I have one or two.
Please.
So thank you for your presentation. Furniture actually at the community roundtable that came up in our group for discussion was the importance of furniture and how the impact it can have on students and teachers. So I appreciate that you highlighted that because I agree that is something that I think would be great to focus on. As far as the gym lobby, so I'm curious, so that seems like, I think it's a great idea. It would primarily benefit high school students.
It would.
So I didn't know if in your conversations with the other schools or if when you go back out and you talk to them, is there a space in each school that could be some sort of communal, inspirational space?
For sure. So the reason that we ended up choosing a space that was solely in the high school was because in most of the other schools, they spoke to there being that sort of a space where they could do that. And this would benefit the high school and middle school, I believe. In my discussions with Ms. Huffman, she talked about allowing middle school students there. As for the ECC, they mostly talked about like enjoying the communal spaces, like when they sit at carpet together, and that's a communal space for them. And the elementary, I wasn't at that particular meeting, but it didn't come up as a big concern. The bigger concern there was prioritizing natural lighting at the elementary.
And I did read that very scholarly article that was attached.
Yes.
It was interesting. So thank you. Does anyone else have any comments, questions?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you could say a little bit more about what you're envisioning for that space in the lobby.
For sure. I don't think there's a design that we have like set in place of what exactly it would look like. We've discussed a bit about having several options of flexible seating. This doesn't have to be anything like crazy, right? We're not expecting like rocking chairs or whatever, but just like having options where students can sit outside of the typical like plastic, small confined chairs, having desks available, maybe like a bar desk, and having like outlets so students can charge their phones or computers. So just enough funds to provide sort of a seating area that might be comfortable than the usual classroom furniture, and a place to charge devices are the main things that we're looking for out of that.
Thank you.
Did we have any money budgeted for furniture for that space as part of the construction?
We did not.
Okay. I'm also curious if we have like business class, or do we do like, I'm just wondering if you could do like, if the decision was made to do this, if you could do like a collaboration and sort of do something along the lines of giving a budget and having the students help create what kind of furniture they would like in that space, but I don't know, just throwing
Yeah,
that
that'd be awesome. Like, that sounds like fun.
Might be kind of fun to collaborate in some ways between paddleboard classes, something. But.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, just since this came up, Chris, you know, in the like warrant list, there's several items, purchases for furniture for teachers. Is that addressing some of these concerns, like classroom and?
It isn't. That's really more rugs and things of those sorts. It's not large pieces.
Okay. And what fund are those coming out of?
General fund.
General fund. Okay, but I mean, which particular account code do you know?
It should be on the warrant list. I'm not sure exactly what
Okay, I'll have
you're
to pull
referring
it.
to.
Okay, I'll pull it back up.
Would furniture replacement be part of this facilities plan that we'll get?
And you'll remember we did have a plan in place to start replacing this classroom seating that we started last fiscal year. We had to cut those out of the budget for this fiscal year.
Thank you very much for your presentation. All right, next we have board committee reports. I don't know if anyone has like a report from their meeting. No. So the first thing would be the committee applicant placements. So it looks like we've received some more applications for our strategic planning committees. And so just want to go through those, and I guess we just discussed, I wasn't here for the last time you guys did this, so I didn't know what.
Yeah, I mean, I think a recap for how we placed folks before. We are appreciative for every community member who volunteers, and so at the time we accepted all applications, we did attempt to place folks on their first or second choice committee in an attempt to at least have some membership on each committee, with the recognition that they were probably a little bit smaller than we ideally would like for them to be. So although we didn't at the time have a target number for how many community members would be present at each committee meeting. So I'm inclined to use sort of a similar process with this. I did look, if I think with a little bit of jockeying, we could put folks on each of the commit. Every one of the 5 committees could get a new member, and maybe resources get 2 new members, which I think would be really great. I'm really appreciative that so many community members are who are, I think, are new to this level of engagement with the district are stepping up.
I agree, and I think there were, I had asked, and Dr. Jameson had provided us the number of community members already on the different committees, so it looks like For Our Resources only has 2. Everyone else has 3 or 4.
If you go to the agenda item 3 and with that table that lists the committees, if you scroll all the way to the right, it actually lists the people that are on the committee, including board members and staff members and community. So
For Our Resources has 3 community members currently assigned.
Okay.
I mean, since these are board subcommittees, can we refer these applications to the individual committees and have them make a decision by the chair of the committee or by the committees themselves, rather than doing it?
I think the only issue is that we may have to move people to different ones, and so I think in the interest of time and getting them on.
It might be helpful then to have like a little spreadsheet to see. I mean, I went through all these applications, and it does look like there's probably enough to put people on their first choice.
Yes.
But what about just being able to see, because there was some overlap on a couple of the committees.
So I wrote them out, just so,
Okay.
you know. So Mr. Blon and Ms. Goldsman both wanted For Our Resources as their number 1, and since that, I would be inclined to put them on. Mr. Blon said that that is pretty much the only one he's interested in, so I would tend to for sure give him that.
Got more of a
He's an
facilities
engineer,
background,
yes.
whereas Ms. Goldsman brings the
The
finance
financial.
background. Yeah.
So I guess my vote would be to put him on that one for sure, since that was his, but I don't know people.
I agree.
And then you had two people for our students first. That was Miss Clark and Miss Baker.
Ms. Baker would be a good fit for that.
Okay.
And I noticed that Ms. Clark, her second choice was
Is
actually
people.
people, which I thought was an appropriate.
That was what I was gonna suggest too, because she, looks like she has a master's in education. Or Miss Ryan Smith, as she had 4 people second as well, and she's a teacher, but.
Yeah. I saw Ryan Smith on For Our Health because that was, I think, her first choice, and Miss Mueller selected For Our Community as her second choice, with health being her first choice. So that was, yeah. Again, some jockeying a little bit.
I did notice though, Miss Mueller also noted that she was really only interested
In
in
health.
health.
Oh,
So
yeah.
so I guess my thought would be to put her on health for sure, if that's. So then it leaves the.
Mhm.
I guess we could ask Miss Ryan Smith if she'd be interested for our people. Do that 1 second, since it's her second choice, or no? Or Miss Baker, you said Miss Baker.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think.
You said she'd be good on students.
I think she'd
Yeah.
be really
All right.
good.
Yeah, I think
All right.
as well.
so that's
Yeah.
fine.
So maybe we do need to just have a recommendation that we actually approve at the November work session or something like that. I don't, or, I mean, we can talk
I'd
this
like to at
through
least
too.
reach out to
Yeah.
these individuals.
And make sure if we're switching them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just to clarify for your sake, I think we have Mr. Blon on resources, Ms. Baker on students, Ms. Mueller on health, for sure. I'm not clear where we ended on the other 3. Were we asking Ms. Clark for people? She would,
Yes.
okay, so.
And Ms. Goldsman on resources, yeah.
And then Ms. Ryan Smith would be on. Who didn't get one?
Community doesn't have a new member. But, I mean, again, we don't have to necessarily put somebody on every
No.
committee new. So, yeah,
For health?
she could be.
Okay. So, I think we ended here. Highlight.
And these committees are all open meetings too that
Yeah.
are posted, so folks can always attend meetings regardless of if they've been officially placed on committee.
To join,
Mhm.
there's still room. So I think that's what Any other questions or discussion?
Did we actually vote on those
Do we have to vote?
previously? I mean,
This is, well, it's listed as a discussion item.
right, yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think back to what we did.
Well, I don't know that, I mean, I think our next conversation may inform what
Okay.
we need to vote on. I don't
Sure.
know.
Yeah.
So next would be committee terms. All right, so committee terms, was this sort of,
So part of the initial conversation when we first started, because we didn't have the large numbers that we were looking for, is that those individuals would continue to roll beyond the first year, which gives them a full year because the committees actually started late. And so in the conversation and thinking about having everyone to roll off at the same time would mean that any institutional knowledge would actually leave with that. So I wanted to have some conversation with the board around what does that look like so that we can maintain some of the individuals that we have while also rolling through when we add new people to the committees. So I was hoping the board would have some conversation about that.
so I think maybe the thought was like, the people that we're appointing now, we could ask them if they would commit to completing, how are we, this year and the next year, so that you don't have everybody ending at the same time. It almost seems like everyone would have to be on a 2-year term, right? So you're not all ending at the same time? I don't know what people's.
Well, you could do it year by year and have essentially two 6-month intervals where you appoint people to the committee. So like say every year in November and every year in May, and then.
Or you just
and
do
then
it in May, but you say like.
You just need staggered
Yeah.
onboarding and offboarding. That's all. And so that's if you're going to have. Some of these people may not have realized they were filling out an application for a 2-year commitment. They might have thought it was for 1 year, because even the strategic plan itself expires in a few years. So maybe we have just 1 year, and then they can be asked if they want to renew.
I think that's actually what I put in the document that
Right.
was
I believe so,
presented
yeah.
last month too.
Exactly.
And because these are advisory, I mean, you know, if we were talking about like planning and zoning for the, you know, that makes like explicit recommendations, these being advisory committees, I'm like less nervous about like explicit like, you know, terms, as opposed to like, this is an opportunity for more voice to advise us as we're living out the strategic plan.
But we would still have to have terms, so that, I mean, there needs to be some commitment.
Yeah, you're
attached. So
asking,
maybe
you're
a
asking to
commitment.
fill out an application for a particular period of time.
Yeah,
They're-
right.
they're
So
committing
then-
to something.
I think we need to, as part of the next conversation, develop when we reach out to people.
Yeah, I think
to
that's
make
it.
sure we know who's leaving and who's staying.
Yeah, I think that's it, or you just say that there's 2 times of the year, you know, where people come on and then they have the chance to come off, but at least you have a staggered change in the committee, so it's not everybody leaving at the same time. So these people would be committing to a year, and the people that we had from last spring, we would approach those 3 committee members and offer them the opportunity to get off the committee come the spring. Does that make sense? At least I'm thinking of for our resources where we have 3 committee members, community members who are who have been on it since the spring. In my mind, come late spring, we should ask them again, would you like to be on for another year? I mean, we'll take anybody, frankly, but we would ask them, would you like to commit to another year? And then they're intentionally included in setting the meetings, intentionally included in helping set the agenda. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
As opposed to just coming on a one-off.
So 1-year term and 2 periods of onboarding.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation, but I'm not, wedded to that. It seems like we've already done a nice spring onboarding, and now we're doing a fall onboarding. So it seems like we've already sort of created this
Yeah.
already just by.
So we
just by
wouldn't
virtue
really
of
be
how this is.
heavily advertising again until February or something like that.
Yeah, so I think when we talk about the next thing, we can maybe, instead of doing that in February, maybe we do that in March. So, yeah, it doesn't matter to me. I think that sounds good.
Just for clarity of notes, so continuing with the 1-year term, having 2 periods where we're eliciting participants to be on the committees. I wrote down March, and the other time frame would be,
Now?
No,
whatever.
it's
Now.
October.
thank you.
So that would be in plenty of time, because like we have a meeting in December for ours, so.
Got it.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that? All right, next one is item 4, Strategic Plan Advisory Committee Roles and Responsibilities. So Katie had kindly drafted for us a document sort of outlining this that matches what's required under our policy BCE. So I don't know if there's anything you want to share before we discuss it, or just we can dive in.
It has not been changed from last month when I shared it initially, so hopefully folks have had a chance to review.
Well, in light of just the most recent discussion on item 2, and it's already highlighted there, the word February, that may just need to be updated to, say, March and November, or, sorry, March and October, or something like that. March and, either it's April and October or March and September or something like that.
I mean, with the summer break too, it's sort of, it doesn't maybe have to be exactly 6 months.
Yeah.
And then that they would be for 1-year terms on that same cycle, so that sentence will also need to be adjusted.
For me too, in understanding part of the function of these, I guess in the first paragraph sort of outlines sort of the role, and I guess would the point also be for these committees to provide sort of suggestions to the board about maybe things that could be tweaked, or, you know, I guess I'm just trying to understand their relationship as a function in relation to us, since they are board committees. I don't know.
Yeah, they do. They give input. Because we had ours with me as this, but that's what it's for. That's why they're all in the committee, to give their input and how we move forward, and her ideas, and we just add them on the minutes and work on them. Yeah, so everybody give their input, not like they just come and we talk.
And then if there are items that the collective committee wants to bring to the
Okay.
board, that information is usually funneled through the priority leaders, and then I bring those items to our board check-ins when we develop the agendas to see what items should be brought forward for recommendations and things of that nature.
Okay. So instead of the board member, I'm just, because we're saying they're board committees, so that's why I'm trying to understand. So I know we do our summary that is in the, and do a little update. So I guess at that time too, the board member could update the group. So it would be at that point.
Well, yeah, so the committee, so we've chosen to delegate to the committees the managing and the oversight of the strategic plan. And because we chose that approach, which certainly I would agree with, I think that was a good decision, but that means that we are checking on behalf of the board that the strategic plan is being implemented as approved. And then if it's not, or to the extent that it is, or to the extent that it's not, that's our obligation from the committee to report that back to the board. But we're not taking decisions on behalf of the board to direct staff to make changes, but we're reporting to the board that certain things are not being done, or certain things are being done well and ought to be commended. But, that's the extent of the committee's task, as the document here states.
And so I guess that was a question I had about, like, some of the, like it said, like, providing accountability. So it says we're holding parties accountable. I guess I just wanted to flesh that out a little bit, what that meant. Like, what, is it just that we're having them, so in that way we're holding people accountable, or is there some other sort of accountability measure? Where are you? It was in section 2. No, sorry, section 1. Number 1 was purpose, and then right for providing accountability.
So I can jump in on that one. Part of that goes back to the MSIP 6 standard L under leadership. The board is required for holding administration accountable for the implementation and the results of the strategic plan. And so, to Brian's point, if an item is being presented and they're giving updates on action steps and we're not meeting them, then that's the conversation that he's talking about, bringing back to the full board. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just trying to link it all together.
Yeah, I mean, effectively, these committees, because the other option, if not using the subcommittees, is to have a deliberative board process where we're evaluating in our meetings each of these items on a regular basis, and that would consume a lot of the the time in these meetings, and so the decision was made to delegate to subcommittees, and that's fine. But yeah, so the hard questions should be asked in these committees, and to verify that in fact the strategic plan is being implemented.
Okay. I guess the only other thing too is like in section 2, I guess I would love to say they will meet at least quarterly, because I think it would be nice to give, like, some of these boards, you know, if everyone agrees, may want to meet a little more often than quarterly, depending on what they're dealing with. Not that you have to, but that the option is there. But I think it's hard. They're all very different. I think what they address, and the resources kind of touches them all. So that's one I could see maybe having more than before.
So at least quarterly instead
Yeah.
of a week. I think that's a good idea. Because that means that allows you to have additional meetings if you want.
If you want to.
How much notice is necessary for calling a meeting, though? I mean, I think part of the need for establishing quarterly meetings is to give ample opportunity for the operations of the district to happen, and to not create a situation where, you know, folks are being deferred from, you know, core work to prepare for a meeting that wasn't established at a certain cadence. So that would be my concern about, you know, like, what on a set meeting schedule, you know, established at some point, as opposed to, you know, like calling at.
Well, I mean, I think what I'm envisioning is like you have a meeting, you're like, oh, this is more pressing than 3 months from now. Could we perhaps meet in 6 weeks, right? Like, I mean, if you want to put an upper limit on it, that's fine. I just think it's nice to give some flexibility to people. The meetings, I mean, ours was only an hour and a half long, so I don't know that it's, I don't know. I mean, I just think it's nice to offer that flexibility if people feel.
Because we set ours up quarterly, and you gotta think about everyone on the committee. Honestly, it was hard even just get our committee to agree and say what date and time we were available. So once we've set that and we make it quarterly and add that on our calendar, it works. We gotta understand that everyone have lives outside of here, and we are doing a great job. That would need to be communicated. I think that's something that's up to the league to say, hey, do you think this is an in-person meeting, Zoom, or whatever, but not just to say, okay, well, we only had an hour and a half, we didn't get what we wanted to get completed, let's meet again. It would be.
Yeah, it would be a group decision.
It's just quarterly with us, we have on our schedule, we know we're gonna meet. It should be no reason that no one cannot make these meetings. You know, I think we gotta think about the whole picture.
Except mine, someone couldn't, so I would also like to offer a Zoom option if possible, because we have someone who's, so, I guess I'm, okay, I mean, I guess I figure I'm not saying like these people are gonna meet monthly, I just think it's nice to offer the option. I mean, I'm not gonna force anyone to come, but it's not a hill, you know, so.
Yeah, I think the other bit about this was just to be clear with folks when they were signing up, what they were signing up for. Because I do think that was one of the big questions at the outset was, well, how much time is this for, you know, community members? So, yeah.
I would like to offer too that depending on the information that's being requested, so for our students committee, if you're looking at a regular cadence of data, the benchmark assessments are only done 3 times a year, so you wouldn't be able to meet as frequently because the data that you're looking at wouldn't be readily available. And of course, state data is pretty stale by the time we get it. I think our benchmark data would provide more insight into whether or not our teachers are growing students.
think the language as it's currently drafted is fine with the reference to quarterly. I mean, it's a roles and responsibilities document. So I think as the needs arise within the committees, I think everybody understands. But yeah, the expectation should be, the norm should be quarterly.
Right.
And I think most everybody will understand that. Yeah. I would like to say, to Maya, who's here as well, we would be, I think, grateful if you would pass on to the PAL board and other students the awareness of these dates. We would be delighted. I'll just speak for our resources. I think we'd be delighted to have students and even have presentations like what you have here, what you mentioned here today, brought to that group to see where it might fit within a budget. We could probably have that more detailed
Next, we have item 7, CBA Communications Lab schedule. Yeah, I don't.
So for those who were in attendance, thank you to the NEA, to the board for being present and listening to the survey data that was actually shared and the conversation that was had. Information will be sent out to community, and we have a cadence schedule for that. So thank you, Annie, for working in partnership so we could get that information out to community. What we found through our conversations was by the time we received the survey data that it was dated, and it was actually received back in May, and the conversation actually took place in September. So still good conversation and discourse, but it makes more sense from a planning standpoint when schools are actually developing goals and actually looking at data towards the end of the year to maybe use the April comms lab to actually engage in the conversation around the survey data, which then allows us to have the ability to have a jump start before the beginning of the year. And because negotiations start in January, December, the association will provide to us those terms and items that they want to negotiate. That would be a good time to actually have the board to hear from the association those items up front as well. So we were looking at 2 points, looking at January to kick off negotiations, and then also looking at April, which would mean that the association would adjust the time that the survey is actually administered. And I would say from the district standpoint, it's helpful for us because when we do our second round of the state required climate and culture survey, it won't put an additional tax on our members as we distribute that information. So I did want to share that, and it was great conversation as we thought about how do we quickly respond to the data that's being received, and also ensure that our principals and schools and their building leadership teams can engage in that work. The CBA currently calls for 2 meetings per year.
So we'd be asking for a third, is that what's being recommended here? I don't know who has to go back and approve that.
I mean, I like the idea of the timing of these, but I would like a third just to check in. I mean, it was nice to have in October around this time of year. So it makes sense to me to move to April to start with the data, but then to sort of get that mid check-in, like, okay, are we on track? Is that?
So currently the CBA, in order to make adjustments, we actually would have to agree and go through that process for that. So we still can engage in conversation without actually adjusting. I think what we discussed was that we would actually have to have a January conversation around negotiations, which I think we can do without actually modifying the CBA, which would allow us to stay on track with the current cadence. I think with the conversation that we had and the monthly updates based on the survey cadence from the buildings, the board would still get the updates based on those identified areas for each of the schools too. Yeah.
Through the monthly touch point updates?
Yes. So we would keep the current, but just recognize that a conversation would need to be had so that the board is aware but that does not necessarily have to be a comms lab. It's
I
really
gotcha.
just to kind of share
gotcha.
what those items are. And I think that's a great point as we kick
Yeah.
off negotiations.
Okay.
So it would be a modification just to kind of plan to look at a conversation in January. Not necessarily a comms lab, but just to give the
listening.
association, yes, yes.
Anyone have any questions? Good with that?
Thank you.
All right. Item 8, action items here. Let's see.
Move to approve the special tuition agreement as presented.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. May I get a motion for the surplus of district property?
Move to approve the surplus district-owned homes as presented, properties 1 and 2.
Second?
All those in favor?
Yeah, discussion?
Oh, sorry, discussion.
Yeah,
You're-
yeah, discussion.
You're right. My bad. Go for it.
So, I mean, these are right across from the library. You know, they're right adjacent to, do we really want to let go of these? Seems like we'll never get them back, I guess. I guess we'll I don't know, I don't really feel like we've adequately discussed why we're selling these homes.
So just to give some context, this was conversation that was had with the previous board when we created the new space where our alternative education programs moved in. So there really isn't a reason to maintain the homes. And the thought was, as a revenue generator, we would actually sell them back to the community. Right now, with the exception of the gardens, Dr. Dietrich is working with those staff members and also has some language in that we would be able to maintain them. But currently, we don't have a use for them, and the funds could actually support some of the items that have already been listed for either capital projects or other needs within the district.
So they cannot be rented out as rental properties or for monthly income, or?
They could, but that also means that we have to maintain, yes, insurance, utilities, upkeep. And I will tell you right now, with one of our other properties that's listed, that is an exorbitant amount of money and costs and also human resources. So in one of the properties that we maintain, we do provide those resources currently and then also carry the insurance for them. So we did have conversation around the benefits of actually keeping them, but right now there really isn't a need for us to have them. And in thinking about the cost, the preliminary cost for a track and field, the funds that we actually would obtain, it wouldn't cover the full amount, but actually would cover a large amount of what that cost would be. And I would say I've sat in Rich McCullum's pitches every year, and I've been here for 4 years, and I will hear them again in spring, and that has been an item that's been on. And so, you know, I think, thank you, Maya, for not bringing that one up. I think they're aware that I tell them all the time we're working on it, but we're really trying to be prudent with our expenditures. I just don't think holding on to the houses is the best way for the district moving forward.
They are occupiable, somebody can buy them and live there?
They are not coded as such right now, so we would,
Someone could rehab them to occupy them.
yes.
Are they zoned commercial right now?
Yeah,
Because
they
they're zoned
say
public.
there's no
Public,
commercial
yeah.
So I don't, I
public
won't
activity.
speak for the city, but they would be able to rezone that residential pretty easily.
I mean, it's a similar situation to the 2 homes that we owned across the street from the ECC that we purchased in hopes that we would have enough property to create a new drive-through space there many years ago. We could not get all the property there, went a different way with that, you know, renovation change in the parking lot. But those 2 homes sold quickly and are currently, you know, have new residents in them and, you know, are now, you know, well maintained, whereas they were vacant and we held onto them vacant for many years. So,
And They do require some maintenance, so when we talk about deferred maintenance, there's some work that would actually, if we decided to keep them, that we would actually have to put into them too, if we were trying to do that.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
What's the estimated sale value of the homes then?
So that conversation is typically held after it's surplused in executive session, and Dr. Dietrich is actually slated to attend our next executive session to share that information.
How many square feet are they? Are they like 2 3-bedroom homes, basically, if they were rehab? You could probably figure out on your own sort of this pretty hot commodity in the market. You know, so I think you could probably.
I did go on realtor.com, just FYI.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, just so no one tears them down. But.
Okay, I call the question.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Item 3, make a motion on the budget amendment, please.
Move to approve the budget amendment as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, may we get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.